Hey guys, so today you and I are going to talk about Java. So let's get into it. So the question in question was, hi Frederick, I am a software engineer who works mostly in Java. What can I start doing now that will help me in my career in the long run? So I think this is a very good question in general, and it's a very common question actually to try to figure out what your long-term investments are going to be. Because once you get over the hump of learning the bare bone basics of software development, you will of course start thinking about, well, what's in it for me, say 2 years from now, 5 years, 10 years, etc., etc. Like what should you be doing in order to increase your market value? It's very natural. The thing is, when you ask me this question, I you have to understand the position that I'm in. Because I don't know you and what your ambitions are, I don't know what you want to do, maybe you don't even know that yourself at this point. As you can imagine, it's hard for me to say what I think that you should invest in long term in order to achieve a goal that I have no knowledge of. And the fact that you say that you mostly work in Java, well, that makes me start to think in terms of, perhaps you're not asking me what a long-term career investment is. Perhaps you're actually just trying to figure out what you should invest in within the Java ecosystem, or whatever you're doing in Java, to secure the position that you have right now. So this is similar to front-end developers asking, what tools should I pick? Like, what are good long-term investment? What's the future going to look like, Frederick, from your perspective, and so forth. And so, if I'm going to go with that definition, or like interpret your words in that fashion, I will say that there's not much you have to be on the lookout for, I would say, in Java. And I'm not trying to say this in any way to say that in order for me, I'm not stating that Java is a bad language. I don't think so. It's probably one of the most important languages, if not the most important language. Well, I wouldn't go. No, actually, I'm taking that back. That's not. It's one of the most important languages. And the issue with Java is not the language itself. It is Oracle and the way that the Java language has been maintained for quite a few years now. I don't see anything significant for Java developers happening almost at all. Like the community development of Java it is embarrassing how such an important language can have such a slow moving community. In a way, that probably is a good thing as well, because slow and steady is the way of a lot of corporations. But I've never gone to a Java meetup where I felt that, wow, everybody in here is on the bleeding edge of what's happening. That's the sort of sensation you might get if you go and talk to a Rust, Golang, or JavaScript community, or a meetup or something like that. So I think that if you're really into Java and you have knowledge of, like, I mean, I'm not even gonna say 1.9 or 1.8. Like, I'm not gonna try to even take one of the higher numbers. Anything over 1.7, I would say, is good enough by today's standards, in order for you to be secure in the fact that you know enough about Java to have a job, like, even long term. The rate at which that language moves is a snail-like crawl. It doesn't really move that quickly. JavaScript, a whole different ball game. It's like the turtle and the hare in many cases. So if I'm going to give you anything apart from, you don't really have to concern yourself with keeping up to date in Java. I mean, literally, I'm not saying that you shouldn't learn as much as you can about Java, because it's like an enormous platform. The language is huge, and you can spend a lot of time learning it. I'm just saying that, even though if you do that, once you get to the point where you are considered a mid-level or senior level Java developer, there's not really much more for you to learn. I mean, the ecosystem is very, very well defined. So what I suggest to you, if you want to improve your career strategy long term, I think that you should take a look more at the surrounding technologies to Java. You see, the thing about a programming language, which is of course fairly hard for you to figure out if you're a junior or like if you're trying to get into IT, but this is this will make hopefully will make a lot of sense to anybody who's working with this stuff professionally as a software developer. You do not just use your programming language in order to produce code. You do not just use a programming language to run a system and make money from a website. There are so many other things that are going on top of the fact that you're using a programming language. So if you are a Java developer, just knowing Java, well, sure, that's great, but then you have different types of databases, you have different types of cloud solutions, you have different types of CI and CD pipelines and so forth. The backend is an enormous area depending on where you segment and say, well, this is one thing and this is another thing, because they're saying that it's a good long-term investment for you to learn about Docker and Kubernetes, or at the very least provisioning software, things like Ansible, Chef, Puppet, etc., or Salt. This sort of stuff, that is, a lot of people will call that the domain of the DevOps engineer, and this is absolutely true. Depending on how you define it, because an application developer and a DevOps engineer would be different types of entities. But these are the sorts of things that will actually increase your market value in the technical space. Because, as I've said many times before, guys, I know that there is a popular idea that if you are a front-end developer, you only do front-end work. If you're a back-end developer, you only do back-end. Problem is, nobody has a strict rule for where one thing starts and the other thing ends. Or one thing ends and one thing starts. The line is very blurry, and most companies don't care what your title is. They care if you can use the tools and the stack that they are using. That's what they care about. So stacking your bets and kind of betting on taking a more holistic responsibility of being a backend developer in Java is a very good investment for you, because the more stuff you know apart from Java, the surrounding stuff, the more employable you are, the more attractive you are. The other thing that you can do is, of course, to go into leadership types of things. You can take on responsibilities as a team leader and so forth. That is a whole different type of video, how to do that, and I have videos where I can give you some tips, and there are better people for that than me. I'm just trying to give you a perspective that I think is going to be very useful for you. And the bottom line is that I think you should go beyond the Java language in order to help your career in the long term. So what I want you to take away from this is that the thing about asking me and anybody what you should do to help your long-term career, it really comes down to, without me knowing what you want, where do you want to go? Do you want to run your own company? Do you want to become a freelancer, etc., etc.? It's hard to give any advice. The best advice I can give, since you're giving me the fact that you're working primarily in Java, which tells me that you're a backend developer, is to understand that backend is more than your language. Now, Java as a language is fairly well defined. So if you know Java and like a very small set of standard tools around that language, you are pretty much safe in terms of long-term career prospects. But you have to remember that the backend is big. There's like so many things like cloud infrastructure, cloud native, Docker, Kubernetes, etc. Like I can go on and on. All these operations related tools and delivery pipeline tools and so forth, these are very good investments. This is where everything is moving. And if you want to if you take a more holistic understanding and approach to your role as a backend developer, you will be very, very secure for the future, I would say. Other things to consider is if you want to go into management or things like that, or start your own company. These are also options for you that you could use for the for your long-term thinking. But as I was saying, the technical aspects, I think, lies in your understanding that the Java programming language is not the reason why you are an attractive backend developer. You are an attractive backend developer based on how much of the backend you actually control. This is a very good investment long term. Have a great day.